We're joined with Nicole Mollett talking all about the Cultural Baton here in Kent. Now yours was the winning entry, Nicole. Can you tell us more about
That's
that entry?
Right. Well, okay, so I told you about the brief that was sent out to artists. Now, basically, my idea was informed by a lot of what I've been doing on the island in Sheppey, by the means of working with people, because I've realised how important it is for whoever's appreciating a piece of public artwork to have a sense of ownership over that piece of artwork. And what better way to create that sense of ownership than for them to actually take part in the making of that artwork. Meantime, the idea I actually had for the Kent Baton came before the brief was out. I was very interested in all the kind of hidden stories going on in Kent. There's an amazing wealth of not just history, it's also contemporary history, things that are going on at the moment. Things like, the Sheppey Pirates, things like Dead Man's Island in Queenbury. There's so many things that people don't really realise. And I thought, wouldn't it be amazing to create a map that was like an alternative map of Kent that told the story that everybody who doesn't live in Kent, or even people who live in Kent, didn't realise existed. Because obviously there is that kind of general, I think, consensus or sort of, how would you say, it's a cliche, if you like, that Kent is the Garden of England,
yeah.
And it's a very safe, twee little place with lots of farmyards and people drinking tea and eating scones, drinking scones, and that it's all very safe and nice, and it's mostly filled with upper middle class people, and it's not very culturally diverse, and all of these things aren't true anymore because Kent has changed a lot since the last century, and there is so many interesting different things that you wouldn't expect that came out of in Kent at the moment. So what basically my idea is trying to do is to try and track that change and all those different cultural things going on in a meaningful way, and then take all that information and put it into a website form, but also then eventually be in a sort of old printed map form. The original inspiration for this idea was the fact that the first ever Ordnance Survey map conducted anywhere was in Kent. In 1801, the Ministry of Defence was worried about the potential of French invasion, so they felt it was very important, especially for the southeast coast, to be properly measured. So Kent therefore became the first place that was ever measured in an Ordnance Survey map.
Right.
And I thought, wouldn't it be nice to kind of commemorate that really important part of history for Kent in a new way, because obviously we know the size of the land and we know from GPS all those sorts of physical details, but now a cultural map is what's needed, because we don't really know what's going on culturally in Kent, and so basically taking that as our starting point, I thought it would be important to have some kind of vehicle to do this mapping process, and the design of pod, as I like to call it, that I thought would be most appropriate is actually a 1950s style caravan called an Airstream. And the reason why I chose one of these things as the sort of frame is that they've got a very highly polished and mirrored surface.
Yeah.
They're actually, they've got an aluminium body which can be polished so that it mirrors. And I thought this mirroring is the thing that's important, because what I want when the pod, or now obviously we're calling it the Baton, is travelling about, I want it to have this kind of sense of it being a continuous mirroring discovery process. We never stop recording. There will actually be an antennae coming out the top of the pod, which will have cameras and various measuring devices within it, and so people can look into the antennae and see stuff further away, but also maybe we'd be able to record things like the weather. We'll do sound workshops wherever we go to record just general ambient sounds that happen in those locations, and then when the pod is shut, when we're not running any workshops, we'll play those sounds back out So if people approach the pod, it will trigger a motion sensor, and then you'll start to hear all these strange noises. But obviously these noises will all relate to the location the pod is in. And then eventually, obviously the other thing to say is that community groups are not only invited to take part in the workshops, but they're also invited to actually be resident in the pod for one day. So wherever it goes, well, there'll be lots of warning, but it will be normally hosted in, say, a town centre or somewhere kind of obvious where lots of people can get to. But people from all around can apply to actually use the pod for one day. And it totally comes down to what their interests are. So say if you're an artist, maybe you want to have a little exhibition in there. Say if you're a musician, you might want to have a little band practice in there. And then, you know, what I'm asking everybody to do, it doesn't cost anything, but just to record their day inside the pod and then send me that information back online on the web or in post or however you can, so that I can kind of gather all that information so that then they can become part of the map eventually. So basically that's the whole idea. I'm not sure if you want to ask any more questions.
No, all I was going to say is if our listeners would like to find out more information on your Winning Entry the pod, how can they do that?
Well, if you go to the KCC website, and I think it's www.kent.gov.uk, you get led, there's a sort of bar of choice and you can choose culture, and in that they will have the Kent Baton. But also, if you go to my website, which is www.nicolemollett.co.uk, on my projects page, there's a link to the idea and also how you can get in contact. So both those methods, but if you just Google the Kent Baton, it should come up. So I hope that helps.
No, Nicole, I'd like to thank you very much for telling us all about your Winning Entry.
Thank you.